Good afternoon, everybody. You know, one of the genuine pleasures of serving as the director of the DuBois Institute is co-hosting with our board chair, Glenn Hutchins, this annual panel discussion at this historic, magnificent Old Whaling Church right here in Edgartown. Now, we've been doing this for more than 15 years, and it's become annual summertime ritual, and I have to say that I look forward to it every year. The DuBois Institute, if you're ever in Cambridge, come to Harvard Square, 20,000 square feet, right in the heart of Harvard Square. It's got the Hutchins Family Library, the Image of the Black and Western Art Archive and Library, the Henry and Celia McGee Black Film Poster Collection. We have 15 fellows that come from all over the world to be in residence, from Asia and Africa, Europe, and of course the United States. And we have a $53 million endowment. It's a leading research center, center of teaching and scholarship about the entire black world. The black world in Europe, in Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and here, of course, in the United States. And it is what it has become because of our very loyal National Advisory Board and the leadership of the chair of that board. So I want to give a special welcome to our board members who are either here or are coming. And when I call your name, please stand up. Bennett Ashley. As Bennett. Carol Biondi. She's coming, she's not here. Richard Cohen, did Richard make it? He's not here yet. Mitch and Frida Kapoor. Give it up for Mitch and Frida. Michael Linton. Michael Linton right there. A guy I grew up with in Piedmont, West Virginia, Mark Mamlin. I've known that boy for 60 years. Doug Schoen, is Doug Schoen here? Not yet. My Yale classmate, Larry Thompson, on his way. And finally, Davis Weinstock. Now, I want to give a special thanks to the chair of our board, my co-host of this annual event, my dear friend, more like a brother, and that's Glenn Hutchins. Glenn Hutchins is endlessly imaginative, energetic, giving and loving, generous with his time, his ideas, his resources, generous, some people might say, to a fault. If there's one reason why the DuBois Institute thrives and flourishes, it's because of Glenn Hutchins' leadership of our board. More than anyone else I know in the entire American Academy, ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Hutchins walks the walk for African American studies. Give it up to my man, Glenn Hutchins. Now, our topic this year is separate but unequal, closing the education gap, and it is moderated once again by the remarkable Charlene Hunter-Gault. Now, before I introduce Charlene properly, let me say just a few words about the crisis in education in the black community. A recent report, just done in June, by the College Board, found that 1 out of every 2 young men of color, aged 15 to 24, who graduates from high school is going to end up unemployed, incarcerated, or dead. 1 out of 2, ladies and gentlemen. And that's among those who graduate. And what about those who drop out? What are their chances at subsistence, a meaningful, decent life? Ladies and gentlemen, how did this happen to our people? When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, you all know what I'm talking about. The blackest thing that you could be was an educated man or woman, not an entertainer or an athlete. Our people have valued education, starting with mastering the ABCs since slavery, when, as Frederick Douglass put it, our ancestors had to steal a little learning from the white man. What's happened to the role of education within our community and to the public educational system in black communities? I remember a time when teachers in the black community had almost a godlike presence, and our public schools were sanctuaries, communal sites of hope and aspiration. How much of the crisis is a result of structural forces, and how much, if any, is the result of behavioral issues, matters of attitude? And what do we do about this? Well, one thing is certain, There is no more pressing need facing our people, and we need the equivalent of a civil rights movement, a new civil rights movement to confront it, to confront the relationship between poor educational opportunity and poor education and poor jobs, jobs so-called destined to keep people poor and their children poor. Despite the fact that the black middle class has grown dramatically since 1968, and those of us gathered here are examples of that, those of us who have benefited from affirmative action, despite the fact by some estimates that the black middle class has quadrupled since that terrible day when Dr. King was killed, the percentage of black children living at or beneath the poverty line is about 35%. Guess what it was the day Martin Luther King was killed? About 35%. And our public schools, all too many of them have fallen apart. Who could have imagined this in 1968? Dr. King didn't die to see a small percentage of us make it, while the larger percentage of our people remain mired in this cycle of poverty. What can we do about this? What does education have to do with this? Well, that's what we've gathered here together this afternoon to discuss under the stewardship of the great Charlayne Hunter Galt. And now let me introduce her. Charlayne is an award-winning journalist who's not only worked in but also reshaped the news industry for more than 4 decades. The first American reporter for the New Yorker, the first African-American reporter for the New Yorker, and the second for the New York Times. She first came to national attention as the subject of a news story herself, and we all remember 1961 when she and Hamilton Holmes were the first black students admitted to the University of Georgia after a series of court challenges, exhaustive media attention, and violent demonstrations on the Athens campus. Her path-breaking career in journalism, as I said, began at the New Yorker and the Times. She became then one of the most influential figures in television news, where she was a chief national correspondent for the McNeil-Lehrer Report and the Johannesburg bureau chief and correspondent for CNN. She served as chief correspondent in Africa for NPR, where she remains special correspondent. She also contributes frequently, I'm pleased to say, pieces on Africa for TheRoot.com. Among her numerous awards and distinctions in 1986, Charlayne was named Journalist of the Year by the National Association of Black Journalists, who inducted her into its Hall of Fame in the year 2005. Charlayne is the author of the memoir In My Place and New News Out of Nowhere, Uncovering Africa's Renaissance. Charlayne Hunter Galt, ladies and gentlemen, is a history maker who became an historian. And she is one of my most respected colleagues and dearest friends. Give it up for Charlayne Hunter Galt.
Thank you so much, Skip. I guess that's the down payment for my participation next year. You know, every year for the past few years, it's been my pleasure to take part in this event. But I think this is the first time that I have felt so personally and viscerally connected to a theme. As you heard from Skip, this past January, I traveled to Athens, Georgia, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of my desegregation of the University of Georgia, along with my late classmate, Hamilton Holmes. 50 years ago, in 1961, we were excited that the deferred dream of the 1954 Brown decision was finally becoming a reality. The judge who ordered us into the University of Georgia also opened the door to desegregation of the public schools in Atlanta that would take place the following fall of 1961, and that we hopefully thought would end the lie of separate but equal. But alas, not only in Georgia, but across this land, the dream of equal education remains a dream deferred, if not a nightmare. And we are going to look at the whys of that today and the possibility of restoring the dream and delivering on the promise of Brown. As usual, we have a fabulous panel, and this year, a very special guest who comes to us by way of the White House Evening of Poetry and Music, where he displayed his talents to someone who is, I think, landing right about now. And he showed them, as he will show us today, his talents as a spoken word artist, where he will, I'm sure, get the same kind of reception that he got at the White House. He is Joshua Bennett, whose dream was not deferred as he graduated Phi Beta Kappa and magna cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania in 2010. And among his many accomplishments, he also has a book of poetry called Jesus Riding Shotgun. Ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Bennett.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? You sure? Okay. Now I know y'all are real educated folk, but I need some energy today. So who here has seen spoken word poetry before? Can you raise your hand? Oh, okay. So most of you guys. So when you hear something you like, what do? You make noise, right? You snap, clap, okay. Cool, are y'all following? All right, whatever, it's fine. We're gonna have a good time. So when I was first asked to do this event, I thought about, I guess, what it means to have lived the better part of my life knowing what the education gap looks like, if not having had the language to call it that. I've been a teaching artist for about the past 4 years, and this first poem I'm going to do for you guys is called Derek, and it's about my experience at Penn, where I was part of a program called the Ashe Academy, where every Saturday morning we would have kids from West Philly come in, and from about 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, we would do reading and math exercises with them. And I had the same mentee from the time I was 18 to the time I was 21. His name was Derek Pratt, brilliant young man, but clearly I think the educational system he was a part of failed him in some very serious ways. But Derek taught me a lot about why I want to teach and why it's important that everyone that's on this panel is here today, because our children matter. And I'm just really thankful for the opportunity. So this first piece is called Derek. I hope you enjoy. Derek and I play basketball on weekends. He's a citywide champion, and I'm not very good, but he still lets me win sometimes. Claims that he's had more girlfriends than me. We both know how impossible this is, but I give him the benefit of the doubt, like an overlooked foul call during a championship game, and I wonder if he's so adept at dribbling because he's never been very good at holding on to anything for too long. He never travels, has never really left West Philly, so we imagine our kneecaps as jet engines to propel us from the athletic to the imaginary without a second thought. See, Derek never carries anything but his hopes and dreams in that single folder in his knapsack, scarring words onto pages, until ink drops like blood onto the concrete of his composition notebook, and his words become a no-look pass to his past, while I'm able to imagine a 13-year-old boy with astronomical dreams but a 10-foot mindset. See, he's scared to shoot for the moon for fear that he might wound her, because the same hands that win games have also cracked ribs and broken jawbones, because in school, Derek fights as hard as he plays, and I want to get him to take out that anger on standardized tests and break down barriers through his grades, show him that the triangle offense isn't so different from the triangular trade, as I tell him tales of the Middle Passage and how Allen Iverson's braids would have been a corn roadmap to freedom back in slavery days. It's a history lesson taking place in the middle of a park, and I want him to be more vulnerable, but he's got a hardwood heart and a culture of violence egging him on from the bleachers. These children choose blacktop over blackboards, give up grade school for gats, and clap each other like backboards. It's a game they know they are destined to lose, but when Derek jumps, you would swear that rusted orange rim becomes a halo, hanging majestically above his angelic adolescent body left wingless by the guillotine eyes of his 7th grade teachers who never taught him how to coax pictures from the page until imagination is forced to jump off the bench and play by the rules of Derek's game. He just wants to read as hard as he plays, stutter step stereotype, and change the way everyone sitting in the stand seems to view him. And I pray that he never trades jump shots for gunshots, becomes a shooting guard who shoots at cars instead of baskets, arcing bodies through the air until they swish in the caskets, and he's Jordan in his prime, 45 on his back, frozen in time, posterized to the pavement. Because I couldn't promise him that mathematics would make him a millionaire. But he still does his best to pay attention when I tell him that 60 years ago, people that looked like us were afraid of this world's obsession with how long we could remain suspended in the air. But Derek still stresses over his hang time. Can't understand why I beg him to remain grounded, and so until the day my skin withers the color and texture of a deflated basketball, I will always think of him. My hands will always be there, as a reminder that God may not play dice, but he definitely shoots hoops. And I see him every weekend, in the eyes of a 13-year-old boy with a hardwood heart, Wilt Chamberlain's smile, and chain-link fence fingers that hold this entire world in their grip. Swish.
Okay, Joshua, you get to come back. Thank you so much. That was just what we needed to get this ball rolling. And now, for our panel, who's going to rap in a different way. Lawrence Bobo, our sage, our W.E.B. Du Bois Professor of Social Sciences at Harvard. His most recent of many contributions to intellectual discourse was as the editor of the spring 2011 Daedalus, the Journal of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. It was an entire issue devoted to race, inequality, and culture. Michelle Rhee, who has defied the odds of the airwave shutdown for the president and managed to get here in spite of all of that. And we so appreciate your effort, Michelle. Michelle is the founder and CEO of Students First, an advocacy group with the goal of promoting school reform by backing laws and political candidates. She's a former teacher with Teach for America and served as the chancellor of the Washington, D.C. Public Schools from 2007 to 2010. James Comer is the Maurice Falk Professor of Child Psychiatry at Yale, the Yale University School of Medicine's Child Study Center, and a familiar face to most of us Vineyarders. He created the Comer School Development Program, SDP, in 1968, and it was the forerunner of many modern school reforms. Diane Ravitch is a historian and research professor of education at New York University and a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution. She's a former assistant secretary of education, and her most recent book, which is off the charts, is The Death and Life of the Great American School System: How Testing and Choice Are Undermining Education. And finally, Angel Harris is an assistant professor of sociology and African American studies at Princeton University, and he is the author of a just published book, Kids Don't Fail: Oppositional Culture and the Black-White Achievement Gap. So Angel, I'd like for you to